Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to check out my website, www.susanmeeling.com. So on my last video in March, I think it was the 17th that I had the video recorded, I had showed my Dr. Mary Edwards Walker collection piece that I had done, but on the back, I had actually completed painting the back portion of the Dr. Mary Edwards Walker collection piece. I just wanted to show that real quick so that way there's that knowledge regarding the difference. And so today being almost the 20th of March 2022, make sure to go to my website, www.susanmeeling.com. So way back when, in I think it was 1990, there was a female who was a camp counselor when I was at Marlboro Recreation Camp. And I had noticed she had gotten a tattoo. And she was all excited because she had her little flip-flops on. And I was just like, what does it mean? What does your tattoo mean? And she looked at me and she goes, what do you mean? What does my tattoo mean? And I was like, well, why would you get a tattoo? Because, you know, you got to remember, by that time, I had been all the 5 boroughs in New York City and hung out with people such as my cousin Jade and my grandmama and my grandpapa and their friends and stuff like that, as well as my buckug and my buckpoo in Manhattan, Chinatown, New York City, and you know, other areas in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania, but also Lancaster, but not so much in Lancaster for those who know about the Amish and the Mennonites. And so, yeah, no, that's not a thing they normally do. And so, in all different areas in New Jersey, but more specific for certain areas in the 1980s and up to that point in the 1990 area. So, she had told me that she didn't see a reason. She had gone with some of her friends on a spring break trip, and that was it. And a bunch of the other campers were like, oh, that's so great, oh, that's so cool, blah, blah, blah. And I just kind of got really quiet and just listened to everybody and kind of kept to myself while everyone went and spoke with her about it. And she didn't have a problem discussing it. I think she was a blonde and probably hair about to here. And I kind of just looked at her and she looked at me and she goes, Susan, isn't that cool? I mean, that's why you asked about it, isn't it? And I looked to the water because it had, I think it was 4, 6, or 8 pools in this area of Marlboro Recreation, and the dark brown deck area with the lattice fence for the backing. And I said, I don't think you want to know my opinion. And she said, no, I actually kind of do now that you said that. And I was like, well, the body is a temple. So your body is your temple. And my body is my temple. And each person is their own, what have you, and depending on how you treat it, depends on how much of importance it is. Not in a selfish way, just a reality. And so, do you think you're going to be friends with who you went to spring break with in a year? And she was like, oh, we'll be friends forever. And I was like, okay. I I won't ask any further than that. I won't ask if like, and cause it, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. And so then she was like, well, why don't you ask a different question instead of in a year do you think we'll be friends? And I was like, do you think that if something were to happen, that you could reconcile your friendship? And she looked at me and she goes, well, what would you mean? And she said, I don't have words, and I don't want to go into anything really all that, whatever. And she was just, well, what does that mean? And I was like, well, you have a boyfriend. And she was like, yeah, and we're engaged, and da-da-da-da-da-da, and so on and so forth. So do you think that you would ever be capable to reconcile your friendship if something were whatever? And she said, well, I wouldn't really, she wouldn't do that because, so on and so forth. She would know what was and all that, and would, da-da-da. And I was like, I could tell you right now, if I ever had anyone that would be in my life that I considered either family or friend, and that includes biological, that we wouldn't ever have any reason to speak again. If it was absolutely known, I wouldn't ever want to have anything to do with them, ever. There would not be any need for me personally. That is and this was back when I was in Asher Holmes Elementary School. That was that far back where it was, I personally couldn't. There would be nothing of that, if it was specifically known. But I also go to Altada Presbyterian Church. And I believe in the 10 Commandments. And so in my thoughts, if it's known, well, that doesn't say do not covet somebody's friend. That says do not covet somebody's partner, or whatever the words were and stuff. And she was like, oh, it was fun during spring break, and it was one of those, okay. I could tell you, personally, we wouldn't be friends. We wouldn't be anything. I mean, there is the reality regarding my biological sister in that particular capacity, which I have kept true to my word on that, where it was, nope, I haven't got any reason for that. And since my biological mother and biological father had covered that up, there was no need for me to, in any capacity. It's my choice. That's my right to choose, obviously, in every realistic right. So, just that was kind of that particular situation. So, fast forward, I've dealt with certain situations where, I very much believe in the 10 Commandments. I haven't ever hidden that. Despite how I physically look, and despite having whatever the perception is, in comparison to the reality. This is why the saying is, do not judge a book by its cover. This is the exact reason why you don't ever judge a book by its cover. And so, if you go to my website, www.susanmeeling.com, definitely don't ever judge any one of my books by their cover, because not even by the title necessarily. You actually have to read what's in the pages. I don't actually write my books where the title, in regards of certain genres, so like the fact-based genres, yes, so finding a silver lining, finding the silver lining, of course, there is that. There are the capacities of. But the other genres outside of the adventures of Susan MeeLing, Scuba Diver Extraordinaire, and the modern day book, the Adventures of Susan MeeLing, Scuba Diver Extraordinaire is, a 3-volume series, and it's written that way, by the way, for multiple reasons. So even though it's a 3-volume series, there are reasons why that book series is published that way. That is not an editing error. Same thing in regards of finding a silver lining. That's not an editing error. I purposefully did that because of the information. So anybody who didn't understand that regarding finding a silver lining, that wasn't for me. That was for anybody who actually read it. So that way, any person who has any specific background who would be like, well, why would you ever, and right then and there, then you have the remember. This is what the reality was at the time. Remember, so I was 17 years old at the time, and I purposefully chose to do that. So if any person was like, this is that's your ignorance, because that's what you needed to read, to pay attention to detail. It goes back to a lot of aspects as to why I didn't want to have to constantly bring it up, because every one of those points in finding a silver lining where I did remember and then the bullet points was a point where various people, to the amount that I actually remembered, hence my choice to use the word remember, to actually put that there. That's how many people that it took with that many times to actually have to put that there, because if you look at a more recent journal blog about compliments on my website, www.susanmeeling.com, you're capable to read that. I believe the post date is the 18th of March, 2022 for that particular journal blog of mine on the ornery PSA. So, fast forward, I am biologically a female. And in the year of 2012, there was a male that I had been dating after a couple that I had dated. And for those who know Fat Life, that particular aspect. And so I dated this couple. It didn't last very long, and that is what it is. It wasn't intended to be that way anyway, for me. I did not get involved in that particular relationship in that capacity. And I let them know that. That's why, when certain situations went the way it did in the year of 2012, for those who know, in the San Antonio community, I personally was like, well, I've been at various other events, and since we discussed this as far as how this was actually gonna go, I'm gonna go over here. I'm gonna go do my own thing, cause so kind of bite. Not being rude, being considerate, in my opinion, because it's one of those, I'm not going to deal with the emotional discussions in person, despite the way the 4th of July went that year. But, which was, by the way, two and a half months after the end of that relationship. That wasn't even a full month and a half. So, I'm just going to go. I'm going to go over here, because I'm going to do that. So later in the year 2012, there was a male that I had known in person, face-to-face in person, for years, unlike that couple. And so that particular male I had met in scuba diving. He was actually a part of my National Geographic Open Water certification. We were both being certified at the same time. And to be honest, when in class, I had a certain view. I'm the firstborn to a first-generation Chinese male, and despite being born as a female, I'm still the firstborn. And so for those who don't understand the Asian culture, if the secondborn is a female, well then that's different in comparison to the firstborn. So for those who are in any culture, especially America though, if you thought that we were treated the same when growing up, absolutely not. Because to them, especially, even though my biological mother being Caucasian, my biological father being first-generation Chinese, though I do have, and they are my Bakung and my Bakpu, they are not my biological sister's Bakung and Bakpu. They are her great-grandparents. So I had to get accustomed to saying great-grandparents in school because of the fact that they are my Bakung and my Bakpu, but it's not to the same capacity because they are my Bakung and my Bakpu in comparison to my biological sister. She was 4 years of difference. She's 4 years younger than me. And so for those who can do arithmetic and know when in reference to growing up in youth, you understand that difference. So that is what it is, but it is important for this particular point. So while some people don't necessarily understand, or in prior times haven't understood or even known the slightest aspect of common sense, that there are reasons why I go around to get to certain points of details, because every detail interconnects and is important. But you actually have to have patience. You actually have to have that. Because if you want to do the stereotype of rushing through, well, at this point in time in 2022, as the COVID has gone on, anybody that gets into temper tantrum mode, no, you don't actually have the right to at this point, in my opinion, because it's one of those, how many people have actually been going out as often as beforehand? So literally, it's just in whatever capacity of to take into consideration. Because then at that point, it is the personality failures regarding individuals that I once knew in person, face-to-face in person, because of the length of time. Because obviously, with the way the COVID situation is, despite opinions of, if anybody were to roll their eyes or, oh, this takes whatever as far as time in comparison to events that we were at in person, face-to-face in person, that just lets you know how you actually were in person, face-to-face in person, in comparison. And having a lengthier amount of time because of that really truthfully lets you know what you can self-evaluate as far as that's concerned, in comparison to what I was dealing with during the time frames of, especially after waking up from my coma, you know, after my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, but, you know, depending on which lifestyle and where. So from, in regards of what's supposed to be the adult consenting lifestyle, well, that's 2004, 2005, in being a biological adult. Again, I was born and raised in New Jersey. I grew up going to New York City in the 5 boroughs in the 1980s, you know, when there were yuppies, and the 1990s. My biological father went to the school of Bulova. Does anybody know how certain yuppies were in the 1980s and 1990s? Just saying. He was a certified watch repair for the school of Bulova and could work on Rolexes and Movados and Seikos, among a few other higher end. And he was capable to certify gemstones. So, you know, it's just New York City, the 5 boroughs. and my bakung and my bakpu, they just lived in Manhattan, in Chinatown. That's all. They only had, like, I can't remember whether it was the top first, second, or third floor with a 3-bedroom, what would be considered apartment, but really a condo that they owned. And in that 3-bedroom that they owned, it had a full walk-in bathroom that you could actually slide the shower door. You didn't have to go and put in a curtain. No. You could actually slide the glass door. That's my bakung and my bakpu's apartment or condo in Manhattan in the 1980s and 1990s. For clarifications. So, you know, that's just what I grew up going to in comparison to what I grew up with, because that's my bakung and my bakpu. So, you know, just mine, though. Specifically only mine. And by the way, my first name is Susan, and that's my legal first name. First legal middle name is MeeLing. And yes, the M and the L are capitalized because that's how you do it in that regard. And then my legal last name is my children's, as far as that's it, but it's my scuba diving certified last name, which is Nichols. And so, you know, spent some time in the state of Texas. When I got back, my hairstyle was a little different. And even though I had called, I have etiquette because I was taught it. So I awaited an actual invitation in comparison, you know, in 2019 and 2020 and 2021. So in those references to that biological aspect, but I did get to go to Fort Worth in regards to see my daughter and my ex-in-laws because they invited me. Because that's etiquette to not impose myself in somebody else's space in that regard. Because that's, you know, common sense in comparison to just showing up without an invitation. And if the possibility of a misinterpretation, RSVPing is a etiquette standard by a lot in other references. But, you know, I was raised a certain way, and that's important by a lot. So I tend to do what I can to respect other people's time and respect other people's personal space and respect just in general, in comparison to certain things that I've dealt with. So I'm going to do what I can to kind of go a little, and I have written a little notation in my Fat Life account, Lady Dori Belle, but you can go to my website, www.susanmeeling.com or www.ladydoribelle.com. It leads you to the same place because I'm the same person. I haven't changed. Nope, I may have added a tattoo here or there, changed my hair color by just a smidgen in regards to the red because, you know, it's not the red shade that I personally prefer. But I've been working with the mixture because it's apparently a different batch in comparison to what I have been using for my hair color in comparison. I have my preferences and I have my rights to have my preferences in comparison to lesser than. And so, very particular about my hair color, and that does actually impact my mood. So it's always best when I'm in a good mood in comparison to a bad mood, because You know, if I'm in a bad mood, then why would I care about certain things such as modeling? That's a big factor. So if I don't have that, it's a I don't care sort of factor, because I'm very particular. Because I was and am a certain way. And that just is as it is. I don't think there are many that aren't a certain way when it comes to those particular factors. So if they don't have certain things, they just won't. It's common sense. Kinda similarly regarding that vet life aspect. So the guy I had met in scuba diving, and you know, a few other times, I personally just couldn't find him attractive. Mainly because being a mom of 2 children in elementary school, and, you know, assisting this male to dress in what I considered a onesie. This is also why I got the Farmer John version, because I wanted it's the closest I had to a bikini. You know, because I had the, what is a Farmer's John, where, you know, it's long pants that go down essentially to where the ankle thingamabob is, and, you know, strap that comes up here, and then a second wetsuit, which is, you know, it's long sleeves and shorts. In comparison, that's the closest thing I could wear to a bikini in the water, and it not break. I learned that even in Arizona in 2013. So we had reconnected years later after scuba diving in 2009. And it was after the U-Haul situation that was a problem regarding my scuba dive gear and personal belongings and, you know, photo albums and all that stuff. But yay, I got my scuba dive logbook in comparison to what I actually preferred and needed to actually get taken care of in comparison to those particular factors, because only people who take scuba diving seriously and appreciate life would ever only do things in the correct, honest, and genuine capacity. Because those who wouldn't appreciate life would break the 10 Commandments when it comes to scuba diving. Obviously, I appreciate life in comparison, and you learn that in the long term. So, you know, so this guy, Matt, but on FetLife it was a different name, and he contacted me, or I contacted him, Facebook, whatever it was as far as that was concerned. And he went to International Scuba at the time in comparison to Scuba Toys in reference to Carrollton, Texas. And, you know, but this was in 2012 that he contacted me. Or vice versa, and, you know, we kind of dated. And so at some point in time, I was at his apartment, and it was after I saved his life, and after he heard how my biological mother spoke with me on the phone as far as, you know, the paperwork, first initial signing in reference to my daughter. For those who know that particular situation, that particular phone call the day before was literally the official paperwork beginning. At that time, that day. So, wow, whatever anybody else's opinions were for all that other stuff, this is what I was dealing with at those times in 2012 in comparison to what would have actually been assisted in the correct ways for me, for my son, and for my daughter as our family in comparison. Because common sense, and if you have family values, and if you actually care about family in general or your own, you know, again, scuba diving, big important factor, so important. But nonetheless, you have videos on my Facebook page in regards of January as well as December and February, me going swimming without a wetsuit. At all. Granted, I have in one kind of a long sleeve. Believe me, it's actually metallic. And so anybody who knows about metal and then the winter time, but I did earn my polar bear scuba diver aspects, and I was born and raised in New Jersey, and anybody who's ever gone swimming in the ocean in New Jersey, even during the summertime, it's cold. It's really cold. It's always cold. It's not ever actually warm in the Atlantic area of the ocean in New Jersey. It might seem warm compared to the winter by maybe like 10 degrees. That's not very much when you really think about it. It could be more than that. I don't know. But, you know, without a wetsuit, because why bother? I grew up going there at all times of the years, different areas of Point Pleasant in the beginning, different areas of Asbury Park, Sandy Hook, and stuff like that, well before I went to camp. I mean, you know, I don't know if people know this or not. You have to kind of be an infant and a toddler before you can go to school. I don't know if other people knew this or not, but it's kind of a thing. And so when you're in school, then during certain times, then you can go to summer camp. But I don't know if anybody thought about this, you know. I don't know if I need to get well, you know what, I probably wouldn't have to go to college to get a doctorate, PhD in common sense on that one, because that's just common sense. I'm just saying, I'm not the smartest crayon in the toolbox, you know, but, I don't know. If people didn't know that and they were like, well, we contacted Marlboro Recreational Camp and they said they only go to Seven Presidents Beach at this point. Well, that's also, you know, since whatever. And then there's also, you know, it is the state of New Jersey, and for as many people who said, yeah, okay, has anybody ever put on paper one thing? And then, you know, has that ever happened before? It was the 1980s and 1990s. Yeah, okay. No, that's fine. No, because why would you need the reminder of 10 Commandments in any capacity? Why would people actually need to go to church every week for a reminder? I don't personally need that reminder, but other people do. And so, but I also had a orangery on Palm Sunday in 2000, and yet, before 2000, I knew better. If you've met my biological father. Just saying. And so, if you met him in Texas, that don't count. You want to know why? He was medicated and older. Just saying. Same thing when it comes to Illinois. He's medicated and older. Go drive in New Jersey, but during traffic, and not ever have driven, and then go into New York. Now, I don't mean go on the bridge. I mean go drive in New York City, and then think about what Mike actually was as when I was growing up as a child. Because you have to drive in, like, Brooklyn. You have to drive through Harlem. You can't, like, go, like, on a bridge and get that perspective when it comes to being raised by Mike when he was driving. Yeah, no. And then the streets are so much different in comparison, because it's 2022 in comparison to the 1980s and 1990s. When I was born and raised, growing up, going there. So, you know, I also have made it aware because of certain things. The only time I have ever been in a relationship in reference to whether my biological mother, biological father, and or biological sister, which extends also to my ex-in-laws, if I personally did not introduce the individual to you, that is the only way I was ever in a relationship. So if somebody else introduced themselves to you claiming that they were in a relationship with me, if I did not do that, that is a particular situation that you yourself need to take into consideration. Because I have been adamant about that, especially as best as I could. So that's the truth. I explained as best as I could, but people have their opinions, however people have their opinions. Now, in regards to 2012, which ironically, during that time, my biological mother and biological father and then roommate were like, oh, you should get it. So it was as it was, and later it was involved with this particular scuba diver named Matt. And so, but that was later in the year, and again, towards the paperwork time frame just before, ironically, literally the end of the relationship at that time in 2012, which it was abrupt, not just because I saved his life, not just because of everything that was going on in my life at the end of 2012, you know, and that obviously includes my daughter and my son as our family at that and all that. That's just the facts. So, you know, I had put that stuff out there, you know, hoping that somebody would actually contact me and ask me, like, how they could actually help by telling me what they could do, so that way I could actually make the choice for myself. Kind of figured that would make sense because I was asking, but that didn't happen during those times, despite how much I wrote continuously. It wasn't as, it literally was like if you could have just contacted me and told me either what to do so that way I could, or who to contact so that way I could, and then have the contact back so that way I could actually have gotten it taken care of, or if you actually knew what to do and you could offer that as an actuality in comparison to what I dealt with. I mean, it's that common sense factor, but whatever. As far as how things went, but it doesn't change. And so, at Matt's apartment, after having all that sort of stuff, I've already gone into that, and then one trip out to Missouri, or whatever, and you see some friends through online. We had talked a bunch, which is different, because we had actual phone calls, in comparison to what some people would ever in that social media oddity. So we actually spoke with one another on the phone, in comparison to only reading stuff online. We were capable to distinct, maybe it's because we were older, I don't know, or we are older, I don't know. But anyway, so in reference to that stuff with Matt, he had sent a message after a bunch of situations, an email, text message, and whatever. And there were a lot of problems at that time, specifically because of Missouri area and stuff, or Missouri, however, whatever, same state. I think it was St. Louis. And so, whatchamacallit, had gone and read a set of text messages, and then when getting on the computer and stuff like that, Matt had sent a message. Now, anybody, just you don't need to know that prior part, but keep in mind, what would you do if you read the words, you know, there's a really long amount of distance between the two of us, and then we need to talk. Would it really even matter about all the other stuff that I was dealing with at that point in time, or even the stuff regarding St. Louis, or any other stuff? Or would just those, and it was at the end. It wasn't at the beginning. It was at the end of that message, and it was, well, yeah, no, just because would it really even take that? Would it even take the after effects of my head injury? Or would any person with common sense read that and be like, yeah, Yeah, sure. It's long distance, and we need to talk. And it's kind of like, do people know that there is the infancy stage, the toddler stage, the preschool stage, and then kindergarten for school? As far as camp is concerned? I don't know. It's because the beach thing. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I've had a lot of people tell me I'm not the smartest. So I made fun of by saying crayon in the toolbox. And then they told me that they thought I wasn't the smartest for saying that to them. Like this is actually how this saying came about, okay? So there were a bunch of people and they were like, Susan, we don't think you're really the smartest person. I didn't ever say that I was the smartest person. And so these people and I, we went back and forth. It was in a bookstore. I would go back and forth. And I was just like, yeah, okay, whatever, fine. And so because of, how books usually, whatever. And so they said, Susan, we don't think you're the smartest. And I literally I was in, irony of ironies, I was in the children's section at the time. I turn around and look and go, you mean crayon in the toolbox? And they were like, yes! And I was like, you know what? I don't know. I can't help this one at this point. So let me understand this. You don't think I'm the smartest crayon in the toolbox? Yes! Okie dokie. So I kind of took that and was like, all right then. All right, that's fine. I can accept that I am not the smartest crayon in the toolbox. I'm perfectly content with accepting that. Sure am, because, whatever. No, it's fine. It's fine. No, okay. No, it's fine. No. Plus minus screwdrivers and comparison. No, that's fine. No, there's a whole bunch of books everywhere that you could read. Yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool. And they were a part of the cat sanctuary, so I have to acknowledge that part, but still there are books everywhere. And I already had this discussion with other people before, and I was like, did you really? Yeah, okay. So, and I could make the joke because I had this subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain. I was literally, having to relearn, everything. So, what do you was at that point, literally, a whopping, with that one, the first time when that occurred, I was a whopping 3 years out of my coma. Still had that subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain. And I used that in regards to my biological sister, which was fantastic. It drove her up the wall because she was like, Susan, you're not the smartest. She's 4 years younger than me, by the way, biologically. And so I'm like, yeah, well, and because my son and my daughter. And then Blue's Clues was on. Because it was before her high school started. And I had a whole bunch of crayons for my son and my daughter to play with because they were at the kitchen table coloring. And so, just sitting up the smartest, blah, 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 going on all these other things. And I'm looked out in my backyard and so I'm not the smartest crayon in the shed or the toolbox. Which one is it? And she goes, yeah, Jeff, you know what? Both of them. So not the smartest crayon in the toolbox or smartest crayon in the shed, it don't matter. Absolutely! You are exactly that! You're about to go to high school? In Texas? Yes, I am! That's what your dad does. And then college? Yes! Oh, I gotta warn everybody. I told, and I am not the sharpest crayon in the toolbox. I'm not the smartest tool in the shed. Like, and then everybody's like, well, why are you so stupid to say that? Then because of having to explain all of that, because it's like, really, like, yes, I know I'm not the smartest crayon in the toolbox, and then, no, then people started explaining to me how crayons don't go in toolboxes. I didn't ever get the chance to explain the aspects of literally the crayons and then the blues clubs and then blue and magenta are literally colors of crayons. I was born in the year of the dog, which I could just make fun of just on top of that. Just pointing that out there. But yeah, then the toolbox, I mean, you know, depends on whether or not you're an artist. Because then it is your toolbox. Ish. If you use crayons. Or markers. Or paint. Or pastels. Or which whatever. So, or on our project. And this is the part of the Dr. Barry Edwards Walker collection. And so, which this one has to do with the journalists, as far as for the clarification in reference to, it said that that's paint, not crayons. So, just for the clarifications in those particular references, okay? Because, you know, I didn't know. I didn't know about certain things in that regard. So, and then, of course, inevitably, my biological mother and biological father at the exact, in that same year later on, yes, you are not the smartest crayon in the toolbox. Exactly. No, you are not the smartest tool in the shed. You got that correct. Want to know why? No one ever, I was not in a box, and I was not in the shed. Right here. Just nobody ever got that, and it's like, you know what? I am a very bad joke teller. I cannot tell a good joke, apparently. I haven't gotten it correct. I just, you know, if you did, are you with me? I could get to the punchline so much quicker. And it's a good, clean joke. I don't know. It's just so weird. And it's like, oh, okay. It's like, but then yes, I am not the smartest crayon in a toolbox. I'm not a crayon. I'm a human being. Good morning. Maybe it's that Greco-Roman Latin. I don't know. And I'm not in a toolbox. And then, not the smartest tool in the shed. Well, I'm a human being. I have used tools depending on, and I have had a shed, or two, or three sheds actually. But however, I didn't stay in the shed. Why would you do that? I'm just saying. There's a really good time when I did not do that. I did not stay in the shed, and it was a good idea. A Datsun truck, and so there is that. It was 2004 or 2000, I think it was 2004 or 2005 when that happened. And so yeah, that was I think after the Excalibur Fair situation. So, woohoo, and so, which by the way, chivalry goes a long way. It does. Something as simple as opening a door and holding it open when you see, that there's stuff going on in comparison to certain situations. Saying please and saying thank you. So simple. Sir, ma'am, depending on, or Mr. or Miss or Mrs. depending, however that goes. I was raised a certain way, and etiquette is a big deal on that. And so, but yeah, each area has its own thing, and I was actually raised where if you were speaking with an adult, you used a specific, whatever they have as their last name. So even though I have the scuba diving aspect as far as my legal last name, I prefer MeeLing, which is my middle name. But it's also what my, back in the days of, but in other references regarding my middle name. And so, that would be in my reference for when as a child, or as a child speaking with me in that regard, it would be Miss MeeLing. But because I'm an ordained reverend, then there is the capacity of Reverend Susan MeeLing or Reverend MeeLing. It depends on what level of, in that capacity. So that's just something that I learned in certain areas that people are more accustomed to. So in the LDS church or the Mormon church, they use the term sister or elder in that capacity, although I would think it would be brother in comparison. But I don't know, it probably is elder in comparison, so that way there's not that backward sort of misunderstanding, which makes sense. That seems a little common sense-ish on that one, because, that'd be a little literally in the works. Literally, it's not even a figurative, it's a literal. And so, but I think the Jehovah's Witnesses, they kind of do something along the lines, but I think it goes in a different capacity. I can't remember. I know that there's some aspects. I've always been more open-minded in various aspects of religion and spirituality, despite being a confirmed member of Old Tenet Presbyterian Church through the Presbyterian Church USA. That's been official since 1997, and so no matter where, it's an official overall in regards of how that's done. And I don't know how other locations do that, but as far as Old Tenet Presbyterian Church, but associated with and attached to, they are filed officially through the Presbyterian Church USA, and that's where the situation as that, but having been baptized by a Methodist church as well as Old Testament Presbyterian church, and then having been through a mikvah, and hey, I know there's usually more than one, but especially for that I did create that meme, by the way. I created the meme where I took the picture of the feminine products on a red Microsoft phone that I had through AT&T. That's my phone that I paid for, all that sort of stuff, and whatchamacallit, I had arranged it. That was at Crystal Creek Apartments in Vancouver, and then did the little cloud with the words, the one moment in every female who, whether they're active or not, where they're excited and pissed off all at the exact same second, because for because it's always better to be early than late, and always better to be early than never, because then there's that factor. So I thought that was it's still clean water. Because there was a sink in the picture. And then the toilet area with the, I'm just saying, it's common sense. It is. But you know what? That proved I wasn't in a crayon box and I wasn't in a shed. So there you go. That was back in, I think it was 2013 or 2014 when I did that, and then all that other stuff in that capacity. So yeah. Anyway, that would be from my phone, from my account that I paid for, which would be in my ownership, because of all those factors, but in the references of not ever having allowed anyone else to use my phone, ever, because, I'm very particular about that. It is what it is in those regards, in comparison to other things where it was purchased for me, and only for me to use. In regards to laptop and desktop, in regards to Tacoma. So, but also having taken care of every other factor on my own, and having explained that in a few other capacities. But people, despite the ways I have thought and all those situations, where some might think, well, by their standards of what second grade is, you have to take in consideration what my second grade, as far as that sort of stuff was, in a large capacity, not a small one. And that's kind of the important factor in regards of, so it doesn't matter what some people might think is considered acceptable enough, it doesn't change the fact of where I actually was. I've gone over all these various factors. That's kind of where it's been an annoyance, in my personal opinion, because of certain individuals who think how they have explained themselves as far as their opinion, and to me, it's their opinion because it's my intellect that was impacted, not theirs. So where I was intellectually, okay, fine. If your second grade wasn't to what mine was, that doesn't change that at all. It doesn't change what my background is. So you might disagree that the second grade level, it doesn't change the fact that my education in comparison to whatever in your aspects are or were, is that I've been blamed for certain things that makes no sense for me to have ever been blamed for, because it's not my fault that I was at the levels that I was at. So that's kind of why I get annoyed by frivolous lawsuits, because it's one of those excuse you or participation trophies or anything like that, where it's like, then you don't have any right to complain about the stuff that I've dealt with because of what my grade point averages were. I mean, I was literally in college level aspects much earlier than my high school. So it's a very big deal, especially when making attempts to explain it to people which this is what others didn't understand. My biological father was infuriated that I went to the Army because he had put 4 people through college, and he knew what my education level was. And so with my biological sister situation, it was, how dare you lower, these are actual words, how dare you lower yourself? And couldn't you go in as an officer? Couldn't you go in as a something else? Couldn't you go to whatever? No, that's not where I'm needed. That's the point. That's a big deal. It's far more than just that. I've looked over these military history books. I've looked over these various backgrounds of these guys in these books, where they're from, their education levels. What is, I mean, seriously, it doesn't make any sense why anybody would have any question as far as that's concerned. You wonder why certain what-have-yous go certain ways? Well, this is why. And I made my, what would be equivalent of a legal argument way back when. I was, you know, at that point I was a whopping 12 years old when I was looking at Marine and Science Technology School with the Navy attachment. And that was considered lowering even though, and that was at that time because of the term Marine as well as Navy. Didn't matter to them as far as the technology part. They only saw, it's like, but marine biology. I mean, a marine biologist, seriously, along with working with the Navy and all these other factors to actually make sure that when certain things are tested, they don't actually negatively impact the environment because they've already done certain things in regards of on land. So let's be honest on that because of the water, okay? So I have a few ideas in reference to quite a few factors, and I'm a bit, you know, how I am about the water. Everybody, you know, it's common sense. But there's quite a few situations. Plus, you know, I mean, there's obviously NASA. A female I was in gymnastics with, who we had gotten along, she went to space camp. I don't know what most people think as far as that sort of, I mean, that's literally how scuba diving and space is. But that was us as children. So while she went to space camp, I went to the ocean. They gotta know. So what would be a good kind of on the, because I'm not the smartest, because I gotta be sarcastic with this. No, you know what? I'm not the smartest starfish or sand dollar in the ocean. You know why? I'm standing on land. That's what, see? certain, yeah, it's a dry sense of humor, you know. I mean, you know. It's maybe, you know, it is what it is, you know, or I'm not the smartest star in a galaxy far, far away. Because I'm right here. However, I have been working on my Belle art project. And this is part of my Dr. Mary Wars Walker collection. And there's stars. There's also a star in my tattoo. It has to do with air, fire, water, earth, spirit, as well as the feminine and masculine energies combined along with the phases of the moon and the solar aspects all in one. It's a whole astrological thing as far as that one's concerned. I am so multifaceted, even in such a teeny, tiny, like, inch and a half. inch and a quarter, inch and a half is close. You know. And hold on, I gotta do it. Okay. About 3¼ inches at an angle. You know, just that. So that's a different star. Though see, that's a double one. That's a double entendre because that star and in the Milky Way galaxy. So you know what? I guess I can't do that one because that's a double entendre on that one. So I'll have to. Okay, so not the smartest shamrock in the. No, that one just doesn't work at that point, so that's okay. I still am not that's fine. I'm still not the smartest starfish or sand dollar in the ocean right now, because I'm still on land. Or on the floor, because there's the floor right there. And my feet are on the floor, inside of my shoes. So technically inside of my shoes, on the floor. Jennifer Lopez. Now that song's in my head. I think I also saw that on the YouTube thing. So thanks for watching. Please make sure to go to my website, www.susanmeeling.com, and you have a great